The year was 1881. The Arizona Territory was a powder keg ready to explode, and one rancher, armed with nothing but barbed wire, ingenuity, and what everyone called a crazy idea, was about to face down 300 Apache warriors with a trap so simple, so brilliant, that it would become legend. This is the story of how one man's desperate gamble changed frontier warfare forever. Meet James McKinney, a cattle rancher trying to survive in one of the most dangerous places in America. The Apache Wars had been raging for decades, and raids on settlements were becoming more frequent and more deadly. McKinney's ranch sat directly in the path of one of the most active Apache raiding routes. His neighbors had already been attacked. Some had fled. Others hadn't been so lucky. But McKinney had something they didn't, a background in military engineering from his days in the Civil War. And when scouts brought him word that a war party of over 300 Apache warriors was heading straight toward his ranch, he didn't run. He got to work. Everyone thought McKinney had lost his mind. His plan? To use the newly invented barbed wire, lots of it, in a way no one had ever attempted before. While barbed wire was revolutionizing cattle ranching, McKinney saw its potential as something else entirely, a weapon. He spent 3 days and nights stringing elaborate networks of barbed wire across the narrow canyon pass that led to his ranch. But this wasn't just fencing. This was a maze. He created multiple layers. The first layer was visible, obvious barriers that would force riders to slow down. The second layer was hidden, wires strung at neck height for horses, concealed in the shadows. The third layer was the genius part, tripwires connected to bells and pans that would create chaos. But McKinney didn't stop there. He positioned himself and his 3 ranch hands at strategic points with rifles. The trap wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to create confusion, panic, and turn the warriors' greatest advantage, their mobility, into their biggest liability. On the 4th day, they came. Just after dawn, McKinney spotted the dust cloud. 300 Apache warriors, riding hard, confident, unstoppable. They'd raided successfully 100 times before. This would be no different, or so they thought. As the lead riders entered the canyon pass, the trap sprung. The first warriors hit the visible barriers and veered left and right, exactly as McKinney had planned. The riders behind them, unable to stop in time, crashed into the hidden wires. Horses reared. Riders were thrown. The narrow canyon that had seemed like the perfect attack route had become a death trap. Warriors at the back couldn't see what was happening at the front. They pushed forward, creating more chaos. McKinney and his men didn't fire to kill. They fired into the air, into the canyon walls, creating ricochets and echoes that made 4 rifles sound like 40. The noise, combined with the bells, the panicked horses, and the invisible wires, was overwhelming. Within minutes, what had been a coordinated war party had become absolute pandemonium. The Apache warriors were fierce, skilled, and brave, but they weren't foolish. Their leader quickly realized this was unlike any defense they'd encountered. The invisible wires, the trap canyon, the chaos, it was all wrong. Rather than sacrifice warriors in an unwinnable situation, he called for retreat. The war party withdrew, leaving behind tangled wire, confused horses, and their reputation for invincibility in open territory. McKinney's ranch and his life were saved. Not a single shot had found its target. Not a single warrior had been killed by McKinney's men. But the trap had worked exactly as designed. Word of McKinney's trap spread like wildfire across the frontier. What everyone had called crazy was now called genius. Within months, other ranchers were adapting his techniques. The U.S. cavalry took note and began incorporating barbed wire into their defensive strategies. The face of frontier warfare was changing. But perhaps most remarkably, the Apache raiders never attacked McKinney's ranch again. They spread word among their people, avoid the wire canyon. The cost wasn't worth the gain. Today, military historians recognize McKinney's trap as an early example of force multiplication, using technology and terrain to make a small force appear much larger. His principles are still taught in military academies. One man, for days, and a crazy idea that stopped 300 warriors without firing a single effective shot. James McKinney proved that in the right hands, innovation beats numbers. Intelligence beats strength. And sometimes, the craziest ideas are exactly what you need to survive. Because on the frontier, survival didn't always go to the strongest or the fastest. It went to the smartest.